The Ottoman Empire, rise, glory, and fall. Imagine a small tribe on the edge of Anatolia, surrounded by rival princes, broken frontiers, fatting empires, and restless armies. It was not yet a kingdom. It was not yet a world power. It was only a small frontier community, living between danger and opportunity, between the collapsing strength of Byzantium and the scattered Turkish principalities of Anatolia. And yet from that narrow borderland, a dynasty would rise. It would begin with horsemen, village loyalties, faith, raids, alliances, and patient ambition. Then slowly, it would become a state. Then a kingdom. Then an empire. For more than 6 centuries, the Ottoman Empire would stand between East and West. It would rule great cities. It would control trade routes. It would guard holy places. It would threaten Europe. It would shape the Middle East. It would build mosques, palaces, schools, courts, armies, fleets, roads, and laws. It would reach from the Balkans to Arabia, from Anatolia to North Africa, from the Black Sea to the Red Sea, from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of the Middle East. And then, like all empires, it would begin to weaken. Not in a single night. Not in one battle. Not because of one ruler alone. But slowly, through corruption, debt, war, nationalism, military decay, foreign pressure, and the painful difficulty of changing in a world that was moving faster than the empire could follow. This is not only the story of sultans and battles. It is the story of how a small frontier tribe became the greatest Islamic empire of the early modern age, and how, after centuries of power, it finally disappeared into history. The story begins in Anatolia in the late 13th century. At that time, the land was unsettled. The Byzantine Empire, once the proud eastern half of Rome, was shrinking and exhausted. Its armies were weaker than they had once been. Its borders were fragile. Its capital, Constantinople, still stood behind great walls, but beyond those walls, Byzantine power was fading. The Seljuk state, which had once dominated much of Anatolia, had also weakened and broken apart. Its decline left a vacuum. And in that vacuum, many small Turkish principalities appeared. Each had its own ruler. Each had its own warriors. Each watched its neighbors carefully. Some fought the Byzantines. Some fought each other. Some survived through trade, diplomacy, marriage, and raids. Among these small powers was one frontier principality near Surgut, in northwestern Anatolia. Its leader was Osman, son of Ertugrul. Osman was not born into imperial splendor. He did not inherit a palace. He did not command a vast army. He did not rule a wealthy capital. He began as the leader of a small frontier group, one among many Turkish lords trying to survive in a divided world. But Osman had something that mattered deeply. He had position. His lands lay close to Byzantine territory, and that border was dangerous, but also rich with possibility. On the frontier, a ruler could gain followers quickly if he offered victory, protection, plunder, justice, and purpose. Osman gathered around him warriors known as Ghazis, frontier fighters who combined religious devotion, courage, and the hope of reward. They attacked Byzantine forts and settlements. They captured small towns. They built alliances. They absorbed other groups. With each success, Osman became more than a tribal leader. He became a symbol of opportunity. Men joined him because he won. Families followed him because he offered security. Warriors served him because he shared the rewards of conquest. Later Ottoman tradition tells a famous story about Osman's dream. In the dream, a great tree grew from his body. Its roots sank into the earth, and its branches spread across the sky, casting shade over 3 continents. The dream was interpreted as a sign that Osman's descendants would rule a vast empire. Whether the dream was real or created later to glorify the dynasty, it captured something true. The Ottomans came to believe they were destined for greatness. And destiny, when believed deeply enough, can become a political force. Around the year 1299, Osman began acting as an independent ruler. His territory was still small. A few forts, a few towns, some villages, some pastures, some roads. But in those modest lands, the first foundations of the Ottoman state were laid. Osman did not live to see his descendants conquer Constantinople. He did not see the empire reach Vienna. He did not see Ottoman ships in the Mediterranean or Ottoman armies in Arabia. But he planted the seed. And after him came his son, Orhan. Orhan inherited a frontier principality. He transformed it into a real state. His first great achievement was the capture of Bursa in 1326. Bursa was different from the small forts of the frontier. It was a rich city. It had markets, craftsmen, trade, roads, buildings, a settled population. When the Ottomans took Bursa, they gained more than territory. They gained a capital. Bursa became the first true Ottoman center of power. From there, the Ottomans could collect taxes more reliably, organize administration, support scholars, build mosques, and fund armies. The transition was important. Raiders can take land, but states must rule it. Orhan understood this. He began organizing institutions that would allow the Ottomans to survive beyond one man's charisma. He supported religious scholars and judges. He encouraged urban growth. He issued coins in his own name, a sign of sovereignty. He strengthened government and law. Most importantly, he began developing a more disciplined military structure. The early Ottomans had relied heavily on tribal warriors and frontier fighters. They were brave and useful, but they were not always enough for larger campaigns. As the state grew, it needed soldiers who could be trained, paid, disciplined, and controlled directly by the ruler. In time, this would lead to the rise of one of the most famous military institutions in Ottoman history, the Janissaries. The Janissaries were drawn from Christian boys in Ottoman-controlled lands through the Devshirme system. They were taken young, converted to Islam, trained, educated, and raised to serve the Sultan. Their loyalty was not supposed to belong to tribe, family, village, or local lord. It belonged to the palace, to the ruler, to the Ottoman state. In Orhan's time, the system was still developing, but its logic was already visible. The Sultan needed a force that was his alone, a force outside tribal politics, a force with discipline, a force that would become the backbone of imperial expansion. Orhan also continued expanding against the Byzantines. He captured Nicaea, known to the Turks as Iznik, a city of deep Christian importance. He captured Nicomedia, known as Izmit. Ottoman power moved closer and closer to Constantinople. The Byzantines were now surrounded by a rising Turkish state that was learning how to combine frontier energy with settled administration. Then came one of the most important moments in early Ottoman history. Gallipoli. In 1354, after an earthquake damaged the defenses of the city, Ottoman forces gained control of Gallipoli on the European side of the Dardanelles. This was more than a conquest. It was a doorway. For the first time, the Ottomans had a permanent foothold in Europe. From Gallipoli, they could move into Thrace, then into the Balkans, then into Bulgaria, Serbia, and beyond. The Ottoman state had crossed from Asia into Europe. Its future would now be shaped by both continents. By the end of Orhan's reign, the Ottomans were no longer a small border group. They had a capital. They had cities. They had coins. They had judges. They had soldiers. They had a place in Europe. Osman had planted the seed. Orhan had raised the first walls of the state. After Orhan came Murad I. Murad understood that the empire's future lay westward. Anatolia was filled with rival Turkish principalities, and while they mattered, the Balkans offered a wider field. The Christian states there were divided. Byzantium was weak. Bulgaria, Serbia, and other powers were often unable to unite for long. Murad moved the Ottoman capital from Bursa to Edirne, formerly Adrianople. This decision was symbolic and practical. Edirne lay in Europe. It became a base for Ottoman expansion into the Balkans. The Ottomans were no longer only an Anatolian power. They were becoming a European empire. Murad used both force and diplomacy. He developed a system of vassalage, allowing some local rulers to remain in power if they accepted Ottoman authority, paid tribute, and supplied troops. This allowed Ottoman control to expand without the immediate burden of direct administration everywhere. It was flexible, practical, imperial, but Murad also fought when necessary. He captured Sofia. He pushed deeper into Bulgaria and Serbia. He strengthened the Janissaries. He expanded the administrative system. Under him, the Ottoman state became more organized, more disciplined, and more ambitious. His most famous battle came in 1389. Kosovo. There, Ottoman forces faced a Serbian-led coalition under Prince Lazar. The battle was hard and bloody. Both sides suffered. Prince Lazar was killed. Murad was also killed, reportedly by a Serbian warrior who reached him after the battle. Yet the Ottomans held the field. The battle became legendary in both Ottoman and Serbian memory. For the Ottomans, it confirmed their power in the Balkans. For the Serbs, it became a sacred memory of sacrifice. Murad died on campaign, and his death gave him the aura of a warrior sultan. His son Bayezid succeeded him. Bayezid I was known as Yildirim, the Thunderbolt. The name matched his character. He moved quickly. He made decisions sharply. He wanted to expand fast and rule strongly. Bayezid tightened Ottoman control in the Balkans, subdued Bulgaria, and increased pressure on Constantinople. He placed the Byzantine capital under siege and built fortifications nearby. For the Byzantines, the danger was becoming impossible to ignore. The city that had stood for 1,000 years now faced a Muslim power that grew stronger with every generation. Bayezid also turned east into Anatolia. He fought rival Turkish principalities and tried to bring them under Ottoman control. His dream was centralization. One ruler, one state, one expanding empire. His greatest victory came in 1396 at Nicopolis. A major crusading army made up of forces from Hungary, France, Germany, and other European lands marched to stop the Ottoman advance. The European knights expected glory. They found disaster. Bayezid defeated them decisively. The victory made him famous across the Islamic world and feared across Europe. But rapid expansion brought danger. In the east, another conqueror was rising. Timur, known in the west as Tamerlane. Timur ruled from Central Asia and had built a massive empire through war, terror, and brilliance. He was one of the most formidable conquerors of his age. Two ambitious rulers, Bayezid and Timur, could not share the same horizon for long. In 1402, they met at the Battle of Ankara. Bayezid entered the battle confident. But Timur was a master strategist. Some Turkish forces in Bayezid's army defected or became unreliable. Timur controlled the battlefield carefully. The Ottoman army collapsed. Bayezid was captured. The thunderbolt had been broken. The defeat at Ankara nearly destroyed the Ottoman state. Bayezid died in captivity. His sons fought each other for power. The empire entered a period known as the interregnum. For about a decade, the Ottoman lands were divided among rival princes. Civil war weakened the dynasty. Anatolian beyliks revived. European enemies watched carefully. The Ottoman story could have ended there. But it did not. From this chaos rose Mehmed I. Mehmed I was not the most famous Ottoman sultan, but he was one of the most important. He reunified the state after the civil war. He defeated his brothers and rivals. He restored order in Anatolia and the Balkans. He rebuilt confidence in the dynasty. His achievement was survival. And survival after disaster can be as great as conquest. After Mehmed came Murad II. Murad inherited a state that had recovered but still needed strength. He faced challenges in Anatolia, pressure from Byzantium, and renewed crusading efforts in Europe. He proved strong enough to meet them. In 1444, at the Battle of Varna, a crusading army tried to push the Ottomans out of Europe. Murad defeated it. The King of Hungary died in the battle. The crusading dream collapsed. In 1448, at the Second Battle of Kosovo, Murad again defeated European forces. These victories confirmed that the Ottomans had recovered from Ankara. They were once again the dominant power in the Balkans. Murad also did something unusual. For a time, he stepped away from power and allowed his young son Mehmed to rule. But when crisis came, he returned to lead the army. He understood the weight of responsibility. And when he died, he left behind a strong state and a son with one great dream: the conquest of Constantinople. That son was Mehmed II. He became sultan in 1451. He was young, ambitious, intelligent, and determined. He had studied languages, history, religion, war, and politics. He understood the symbolic weight of Constantinople. It was not only a city. It was the old capital of the Byzantine Empire, the heir of Rome in the east. A city of walls, churches, trade, memory, and sacred power. Its defenses had resisted armies for centuries. To conquer it would be one of the greatest achievements in Islamic and world history. Mehmed prepared carefully. He made treaties to secure his rear. He organized his army. He built Rumeli Hisari, a fortress on the European side of the Bosporus, to control movement and cut off aid from the Black Sea. He brought massive cannons, including a huge gun built by the Hungarian engineer Urban. These cannons could throw enormous stone balls against the ancient walls. In April 1453, the siege began. The Ottoman army surrounded Constantinople. The Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, defended the city with only a small force, including foreign soldiers and local defenders. But the city still had its walls, and the walls had saved Constantinople many times before. For weeks, Ottoman cannons pounded the defenses. The walls cracked. The defenders repaired them. The Ottoman fleet tried to enter the Golden Horn, but a great chain blocked the entrance. Then Mehmed used one of the most famous tactics of the siege. He ordered ships dragged overland on greased logs, bypassing the chain and placing them inside the Golden Horn. When the Byzantines saw Ottoman ships where they believed no ships could be, their morale suffered deeply. The city was surrounded not only by soldiers, but by inevitability. On May 29, 1453, Mehmed ordered the final assault. Wave after wave of Ottoman troops attacked. The Janissaries joined the final push. The walls were breached. The defenders were overwhelmed. Constantinople fell. The Byzantine Empire, after more than 1,000 years, came to an end. Mehmed entered the city and went to Hagia Sophia, the great church of Eastern Christianity. It was converted into a mosque. Constantinople became the new Ottoman capital. In time, it would be known as Istanbul. The fall of Constantinople changed the world. It ended Byzantium. It gave the Ottomans a great imperial capital. It made Mehmed a ruler of world historical importance. But Mehmed did not simply conquer the city. He rebuilt it. He brought people into it. Muslims, Christians, Jews, merchants, artisans, scholars, officials. He restored trade. He built markets, schools, mosques, palaces, and institutions. He made Istanbul a living capital again. Mehmed continued expanding in the Balkans, Anatolia, and the Black Sea region. He fought Venice. He took Greek lands. He subdued Byzantine successor states. He fought Vlad Dracula of Wallachia, a brutal and determined enemy who resisted Ottoman power with terrifying methods. Mehmed became known as the Conqueror. But his greatness was not only in conquest. He centralized power, strengthened law, organized administration, expanded the palace system, and gave the Ottoman Empire its imperial identity. After Mehmed, the empire continued to grow, but its greatest age came under Suleiman I. Suleiman took the throne in 1520. He inherited an empire already expanded by his father, Selim I, who had defeated the Mamluks and brought Syria, Egypt, and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina under Ottoman control. This gave the Ottoman Sultan not only political power, but religious prestige. Suleiman would carry that power to its highest point. In Europe, he became known as Suleiman the Magnificent. In the Islamic world, he was called Suleiman the Lawgiver. Both names are important. He was a conqueror, but also a builder of law, a patron of architecture, a ruler of administration, a symbol of order. In 1521, Suleiman captured Belgrade, opening the way into Central Europe. In 1522, he captured Rhodes from the Knights of St. John after a long siege. Then in 1526 came the Battle of Mohacs. There, Suleiman's forces destroyed the army of Hungary. King Louis II died while fleeing. Hungary collapsed into political crisis. Ottoman influence reached deep into Central Europe. In 1529, Suleiman marched to Vienna. The Ottoman army reached the walls of the city. Although the siege failed because of weather, logistics, and strong resistance, the message was terrifying to Europe. The Ottomans could reach the heart of the continent. For decades, the empire would struggle with the Habsburgs over Hungary and Central Europe. To the east, Suleiman fought the Safavid Empire of Persia. He captured Baghdad and strengthened Ottoman control over Iraq and the trade routes between Anatolia, Persia, and the Gulf. At sea, Ottoman power expanded under the great Admiral Hayreddin Barbarossa. The Ottoman navy challenged Spanish, Venetian, and other Mediterranean forces. At the Battle of Preveza in 1538, Barbarossa defeated a major Christian fleet. The eastern Mediterranean became, in large part, an Ottoman sea. The empire under Suleiman stretched across 3 continents, from Hungary to Iraq, from North Africa to Arabia, from the Balkans to the Red Sea. It was one of the most powerful states in the world. But Suleiman's strength was not only measured in land. He reorganized laws, clarified taxation, strengthened land administration, supported scholarship and poetry, patronized architecture, Under him, Istanbul flourished. The great architect Mimar Sinan built masterpieces, including the Suleiman I Mosque, one of the most beautiful monuments of Ottoman civilization. The empire became not only a military power, but a cultural world. A world of courts, scholars, merchants, soldiers, judges, poets, craftsmen, sailors, and builders. Yet the height of empire often hides the beginning of decline. After Suleiman's death in 1566, the Ottoman Empire remained strong. It did not collapse. It still had armies, cities, wealth, territory, and prestige. But problems slowly grew. Some later sultans were weaker. Court politics became more complicated. The power of grand viziers increased. The influence of palace factions grew. The Janissaries, once the disciplined heart of the army, became increasingly political and resistant to reform. They gained privileges. They entered trade. They interfered in succession. They resisted new military methods. What had once made the empire strong began to hold it back. Europe was also changing. European armies improved. States developed stronger finances. Navies became more powerful. Military technology advanced. Russia began expanding southward. Austria strengthened itself. The Ottomans were no longer always ahead. In 1683, the empire attempted another siege of Vienna. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha led the campaign. For a moment, the city seemed endangered. But a relief army led by the Polish king Jan Sobieski arrived. The Ottomans were defeated. The defeat at Vienna became a turning point. After it, the Holy League formed Austria, Poland, Venice, and later Russia. Years of war followed. The Ottomans lost territory in Hungary and the Balkans. In 1699, the Treaty of Karlowitz forced the empire to give up large lands in Europe. This was a shock. For the first time, the Ottomans formally surrendered major European territory. The age of expansion had ended. The age of defense had begun. In the 18th century, the empire still stood. It was still huge. It still ruled millions. But it faced growing pressure. Russia became a major enemy. The Russo-Ottoman Wars brought repeated losses. In 1774, the Treaty of Kusuk-Kainarka gave Russia influence and privileges, including the right to claim protection over Orthodox Christians in Ottoman lands. This was dangerous. It allowed Russia to interfere inside the empire. Foreign pressure now came not only through armies, but through diplomacy. Internally, reform became urgent. Some sultans and ministers understood that the military had to modernize. The administration had to improve. The economy had to adapt. But reform was difficult. The Janissaries resisted. Conservatives resisted. Local notables resisted. Everyone who benefited from the old order feared the new one. In the 19th century, the crisis deepened. Europe had entered the age of industry, nationalism, mass armies, steam power, railways, and modern finance. The Ottoman Empire tried to adapt, but the gap widened. Greece won independence after a long struggle supported by European powers. Serbia, Romania, Montenegro, and Bulgaria gained autonomy or independence. Russia advanced. France took Algeria and later Tunisia. Britain took Cyprus and occupied Egypt. The empire was losing its outer lands one by one. Europeans began calling it the sick man of Europe. The phrase was cruel, but the political reality was clear. The empire was still alive, but weaker powers and stronger powers alike were thinking about its future collapse. The Ottoman government responded with reforms known as the Tanzimat. Beginning in 1839, these reforms tried to modernize law, taxation, administration, education, and the army. They promised equality before the law for Muslims and non-Muslims. They tried to create a shared Ottoman citizenship. They hoped to hold the empire together by making all subjects feel included in one political order. But the reforms created tension. Some Muslims felt traditional privilege was being weakened. Some non-Muslim communities wanted autonomy, not merely equality. European powers used minority rights as a reason to interfere. The state borrowed heavily from European banks. Debt grew. Eventually, the Ottoman Public Debt Administration gave foreign creditors control over parts of the empire's revenue. The empire was losing sovereignty not only through war, but through finance. Nationalism also spread. Peoples who had once lived inside empires now began imagining nations of their own. Greeks, Serbs, Bulgarians, Armenians, Arabs, Albanians, others. The old imperial structure struggled to contain these new identities. Sultan Abdulhamid II tried to strengthen the empire through centralization, Islamic unity, education, railways, and authority. He emphasized the caliphate, hoping to unite Muslims against European pressure. But he ruled suspiciously and harshly, and opposition grew. In 1908, the Young Turk Revolution restored the constitution. The Committee of Union and Progress gained power. In 1909, Abdulhamid II was deposed. The empire moved into its final phase. The Young Turks wanted to save the state, but they increasingly turned toward Turkish nationalism and military centralization. Then came the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913. The empire lost almost all its remaining European lands. Muslim refugees fled into Anatolia. The old Ottoman world in the Balkans was nearly gone. Then, in 1914, the Ottoman leadership made its final gamble. It entered the First World War on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary. They hoped victory would restore power. Instead, the war destroyed the empire. The Ottomans fought on many fronts: against Russia in the Caucasus, against Britain in Iraq, against Britain and Arab forces in the Middle East, against Allied forces at Gallipoli. Gallipoli became one of the empire's last great victories. Ottoman forces resisted British, French, Australian, and New Zealand troops trying to force the Dardanelles. The Allies failed. A young commander, Mustafa Kemal, became famous there. But elsewhere, the empire weakened. The British captured Baghdad. They advanced into Palestine. Jerusalem fell. Arab forces, encouraged by Britain, rose against Ottoman rule. During the war, one of the darkest chapters of Ottoman history unfolded: the deportation and mass death of Armenians in 1915. Hundreds of thousands of Armenians died through deportation, massacre, starvation, and disease. The event remains deeply contested politically, but its human suffering remains undeniable. By 1918, the Ottoman Empire was defeated. The Armistice of Mudros allowed Allied forces to occupy key points. Istanbul itself came under Allied occupation. The Treaty of Sevres in 1920 proposed to divide the remaining Ottoman lands among foreign powers and new states. It seemed like the final humiliation. But Mustafa Kemal refused surrender. He led the Turkish War of Independence. From 1919 to 1923, Turkish nationalist forces fought to secure Anatolia and reject the partition. They defeated Greek forces. They forced new negotiations. In 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate was abolished. The last sultan, Mehmed VI, left Istanbul aboard a British ship. In 1923, the Republic of Turkey was proclaimed. The Treaty of Lausanne recognized the new Turkish state. The Ottoman Empire was gone. After more than 6 centuries, the dynasty that began with Osman on the Anatolian frontier had ended. Its fall reshaped the Middle East. Arab lands came under British and French influence. New borders were drawn. The caliphate was abolished in 1924, leaving a symbolic void in the Islamic world. The empire disappeared, but its legacy remained. In architecture, in law, in language, in food, in music, in borders, in religious memory. In the politics of the Balkans, the Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey, the Ottoman Empire was not simply a story of glory. It was also a story of violence, hierarchy, conquest, survival, tolerance, conflict, reform, and decline. It rose because its early rulers were flexible, disciplined, ambitious, and fortunate. It grew because it built strong institutions: armies, courts, tax systems, land systems, administrative offices, religious legitimacy. It reached greatness because rulers like Mehmed the Conqueror and Suleiman, the lawgiver, understood both war and statecraft. It declined because the world changed. Its enemies modernized. Its institutions hardened. Its army resisted reform. Its economy weakened. Its debts grew. Its peoples embraced new national identities. Its wars multiplied. And finally, the First World War broke what remained. But the Ottoman story is not only about collapse. It is about the long life of empire, the ability to adapt across centuries, the ability to rule many peoples and many lands, the ability to survive defeat that might have destroyed smaller states. From Osman's frontier to Suleiman's empire, from the walls of Constantinople to the gates of Vienna, from the mosques of Istanbul to the deserts of Arabia, the Ottoman Empire carried a vast human story. Sultans and soldiers, farmers and merchants, judges and scholars, architects and poets, prisoners and rebels, mothers and sons, believers and enemies, victories and defeats. And then, after 600 years, silence. The empire disappeared, but the world it shaped remained. And in that world, its shadow still stretches quietly across history. Empires do not rise in a single day, and they do not fall in a single night. They are built slowly, by ambition, by war, by law, by compromise, by faith, by fear, by loyalty, by memory. And they fall slowly too, through pressure, delay, pride, resistance to change, and the heavy weight of time. The Ottoman Empire began with a small tribe on the frontier. It ended with a republic rising from its ruins. Between those two moments lay 6 centuries of human history. A story of power, a story of faith, a story of conquest, a story of endurance, a story of decline, and above all, a reminder that even the greatest empires are temporary. Only history remains awake.